Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Podcast. I am here with my friend, Mr. Rohan Jivan. How are you, good sir?
Buzzing. Absolutely buzzing. I've been feasting midweek, feasting on the weekend. Just like it's crazy because forget about City for a sec, which we'll get onto, but Liverpool winless over the two games that since we've done the main pod. Chelsea winless, Man United winless, Spurs winless. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
It is probably one of the most successful hate watches you will have in the last week was being an Arsenal fan. Very, very firstly, we're just all sending our thoughts out to Alex. He was due to kind of come on the pod, but unfortunately just had a really quick family emergency. So we're just sending lots of love and prayers out his way. And, hopefully he'll be back really soon with us. Moving to the title race, because I think there's some stuff to discuss here. So you did make mention of it. The last week, we joke and we kid. It was a very good time to be an Arsenal fan. I think both Liverpool and Manchester City having two fixtures each in which they both drop points, right? You are looking at a very interesting time to be an Arsenal fan. You're looking at January 5th, where I think in the last 4 or 5 years, yeah, it's fun, and we've developed a 6-point lead. And it's a matter of how far to take this, in my opinion, about how you must feel and how we have to, the so-called if. I've got this a lot lately where on one hand, I've got people saying we've got to temper expectations. You never know what could happen. And then on the other hand, it's win trophies at all cost. And it's like, well, decide what camp you want me to be, and I will parrot the narrative that you want me to parrot. However, from an Arsenal perspective, there is just so much to be happy about, but the way the squad has been able to deal with things. And, I think it's important to talk about our form, and you had mentioned it, so I'll set you up with that question. How do you contextualize Arsenal's form? Because I think people are kind of not talking enough about the consistency of output that we've been able to receive off the back of what is very clearly an injury crisis. And I think it was absolutely unreasonable not to expect our rivals to do the same. Like, I know I mentioned on pods, Manchester City running way more than they ever have. And this idea, like, I couldn't predict it to be Josko, Gvardiol, Diaz, and Stones, but I did predict an injury crisis that they would have under their own. And I mean, we have effectively staved that off. And, I kind of wanted to get your input on how we've been able to do that and whether or not City can actually do it. I mean, their solution is going to the market always, but I mean, other teams are going to go through something like this. And I just think it's good to reflect on the fact that we're on 90-point pace, having gone through major injury crises, and we've yet to field a consistent 11 for 5 or 6 games that we would all consider our first choice.
Yeah, it's crazy. This is why I think, we've all criticized, even this season, despite of how good the consistency has been from Arsenal. And we've had moments in which we've asked questions about Mikel on certain decisions. But I've always said you need to caveat it with the fact that this season, Arsenal have won 24 games, they've drawn 3, and they've lost 2 in all competitions. 24 wins out of 29 games across all competitions is crazy. And that is not taking into consideration the number of injuries that we've had to experience this season, game in, game out. Only now, I would say the Bournemouth game, there's been 2 games which Arsenal have had pretty strong health in terms of key players. Man United at the start of the season and Bournemouth, really. Every other game, pretty much, we've had to experience a level of turbulence, and we've been able to come through it so far unscathed with a 2-game swing currently. That's what it is right now. And I think this is a really good point to reflect upon the season, just how well this team is doing. Not just the manager, Mikel, but we have to give credit to, obviously, the coaching staff. Gabriel Heinze has been showered with a lot of praise in terms of his impact on the club. And the players, it's a two-way partnership. The manager, Mikel, gives the ideas and the instructions, but the players are implementing it at a level that is giving us this consistency. And at a time when, I'll be honest, George, we'll talk about Man City, but I looked at that second half against Sunderland, and I understand the absentees that Sunderland had away on AFCON. But I looked at Man City and thought they look quite good. They looked better than what I felt at the start of the season in terms of my feeling on Man City. And I got a little bit worried in terms of the impact Rodri was having. And I felt Rodri played well against Chelsea as well in the first half, but then you saw some of his deficiencies in the second half. But, Man City have been able to field a consistent 11 over the past few weeks that has allowed them to build this run. Yet we're still in the position that we are in without, as you've mentioned, having our own continuity. And now Man City are in a period in which you're seeing the injuries that they're experiencing. And I think the data as well backs it up in terms of the number of sprints that they're doing, the intensity at which they're playing at this season in comparison to Arsenal, which is quite ironic with the fan base looking at Arsenal in terms of, Mikel running them to the ground, the players running too much. But you look at Man City and they're running a lot more. They're running a lot more than us. They've not been picking up the injuries, but now they are starting to pick up injuries. And that's not something we wish upon them, but it's part and parcel of where the game is going and how it's just not exclusive to Arsenal. But the difference is that we have so far, with the hope of better health going into the second stretch, touch wood, but we have been able to mitigate that brilliantly. And I think this is a really good moment to praise the team in terms of how good they've done so far in putting us in this position.
Yeah, and I think this could be a bit of tempting fate, but I'm going to do it anyways. Even without a bill of health, like Arsenal have proven one of the only teams in the league to produce that consistency. Like, I think it's worth repeating the level of output that we've been able to do with that injury crisis, because, you talk about injuries are one of those things that we've had constant debates here on the Cannon Pod, and I think all Arsenal fans will, because of not just our history with injuries, but also what we've had to deal with in the last 18 months to 2 years, right? It has been quite a serious point of inflection, whether that's improvement or not in our performances and an impact. However you stand on who's to blame, how we can avoid it, how we can improve it, it has impacted us. It has impacted our ability to see the scope of this team. I'll even go that far, because you can't build consistency and ceiling talk without being able to field a consistent first choice 11. And so regardless of that, I kind of look at it at the other way, the eternal optimist, in the sense of, well, we've proven we can get results despite it. And that's not always been the case. And in
a sustainable way, George, as well. Sorry to put in a sustainable way. Not scamming wins consistently. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely. The creativity and the ability for us in the last, I think, 3 to 4 games seriously has shown a major spike in our central progression. And there's almost a graph. If I could somehow have one of the many stat supporters that listen to the pod map out Arsenal's chance creation, as well as how many times we have lost a player, you will see a graph in which we're losing players, but our chance creation is following the curve, which isn't something that you should normally assume. For example, you talk about a Shirky or a Phil Foden injury, or even take Rodri, for example. Look at the creativity drop-off that Manchester City and the control they've been able to do with 1 or 2 creative people out. And I mean, there is something to be said, in my opinion, for Arsenal's ability to rehab their players to receive the form that we know that they have. And I'm really looking at Martin Odegaard for a lot of this, because I think that the captain has had some, at times, and I have criticized him vocally, so I know that this is going to come a little bit ironic, but I think that sometimes the pendulum has shifted there. He's been subject to a lot of debate in the last, I think, 6 to 8 months. Some fair, some unfair. But the last 3 to 4 games have been a reminder, in my opinion, to the squad, especially of what he can contribute. And I do think that a lot of the creativity jumps that we've seen centrally has come with that spike in form, in terms of how he's been able to get us moving and also show us different ways. And, I look at Bournemouth and I look at it as one of the few examples of seeing the Martin Odegaard Zubimendi duo working in a half. Now, it wasn't like that for the full 90 minutes. I think that the first half was something that we maybe struggled with. But Martin Odegaard's impact and ability to return from injury, and he's not alone. I look at all of our major injuries, and they have been able to return to a very good level. I mean, we talk about post-ACL Jurrien Timber. He's another example of a player who has been riddled with serious injuries, Rohan. Serious injuries. Like, we're talking about a player that's nearly missed a year off. And for as much as we want to give grief for our players getting injured, I think there's a little bit of a thread to be pulled about how consistently our players return from major injuries and look good. I mean, you look at Ben White, he's another one that has missed nearly a year of football. And I go back and I think, look, it's frustrating how he's got injured, but I don't see any physical drop off to his sprint ability in those games that he was back. And, I think if anything, we were at fault for making the injury towards him. So it wasn't a case of breaking down for unreasonable reasons. I think he was showing very physical kind of improvements in that last week where he got those 390s. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on our ability to get our players back performing to a level? Because I don't know if that's always assumed with an injury. And with certain injuries, you look at Rodri, you mentioned it there. I don't know if he's physically the same player, Rohan.
Yeah.
I think he is undoubtedly a technical beast, but I look at some of the moments defensively with Rodri, and I don't know if I can confidently say that Rodri physically is back.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Rodri is a great example where you see the quality on the ball. It's undeniable. The security, how he's able to control the entire flow of the game, switching it from side to side. But you saw the problems that he had. I mean, I think Rodri has, if there's a weakness to his game, it has been when the game becomes stretched and you are tasked to run. Rodri has not, I think if the game is very basketball-y, you can get joy out of Rodri and you can exploit the spaces that he's vacating, and he's not going to be able to recover in the same way as a Declan Rice. But I think the drop-off physically to what we see in this current version of Rodri, it was very clear in that second half against Chelsea in particular, and his level dropped off massively. And I think from an Arsenal perspective, Martin Ødegaard, he's a really good example because he's had 3 injuries this season, all coming in game. And I felt every single...
And weird ones too.
Yeah, but I felt in every game he was looking good. So every time he's came back from an injury here, he's responding, and it's not a worry that I've had in terms of, is Martin Ødegaard going to be able to get back to his level, and the Martin Ødegaard that we know is capable of producing for this team. And since he's came back in his latest injury, I think he's been fantastic. And the numbers as well in terms of chance creation per 90 across the league, line-breaking passes, balls over the top as well, which we did mention in the pod previously. It was just a case of the execution wasn't always consistent, but it's the intent that he's playing with that deserves a big mention. Now, I will caveat it with these numbers in terms of creativity that he hasn't played a lot of football this season. So that skews it more towards his favour. But nevertheless, I think his impact has been brilliant. But yeah, the injuries, and how we responded has been brilliant in terms of how players have come back in. The major one now really is Kai Havertz, isn't it? It's a case of Kai Havertz, because I always look back at when players are coming back from long-term injury. And sometimes I think, as you mentioned, we assume that they're just going to get back to their current level that they were playing at before. That's a big assumption to make, So that's the case where I'm with Kai Havertz. I think history suggests that he's going to come back well, judging by other players, but it's still one we have to wait and see because he's not played much football for a year now. And I think Kai Havertz, a fully fit and firing Kai Havertz for the second half of the season, is a big game changer for Arsenal. It's a really big game changer.
Yeah, and I look back because Gabriel has had some time out too. Madueke has had some time out as well. You look at the Ben White as a sample, the Odegaard. We're listing off 5 or 6 players. Timber, we've got sample. Saka, we've got sample of our players returning to form and returning to form quite quickly. I would argue. Madueke looked brilliant against Bournemouth. He's looked brilliant since his injury, and he was brilliant before it. But again, I think we can't take for granted that injury impact because, yes, we've felt the layoff impact, but I think the return to injury has been quite good from a lot of players.
And also, George, just to quickly, because you'll be able to provide a bit more on this, I also think this season, Mikel, in terms of when players are coming back, we haven't rushed them and we've had more trust in the other players. And I think this was the big thing with people in regards to Mikel in terms of, there was a big narrative on, Mikel needs the perfect tools, ingredients and conditions to thrive. When we look back at our success that we've had under Mikel in the 22-23 season, the first 19 games of that campaign in particular, and then the second half of 23-24, what's consistent is we've been able to keep a pretty much fully fit team outside of certain injuries here and there outside of the spine. But there's been a continuity and a consistency in which Mikel has been able to drill the team brilliantly to produce strong levels of performances when those conditions are there. This season, what he showed is last season was an anomaly in terms of how, the injuries that we suffered. We said it on the pod many times where the backup players and the players coming in reserve, one, are not to the desired level, and two, they are not going to allow us to maintain the dynamics of play that we're looking to play with. But this season we've seen that, and I think because we've recruited a squad now that is in the mould more of what Mikel wants in terms of the players. Now you've been able to see him have the trust in other players, where at St. James's Park, he doesn't start William Saliba. He starts Mosquera in that game. He brings Saliba on in the second half, but maybe in the past he might have started Saliba from the get-go in that game. And there've been other examples this season as well in which he's slowed the release of players coming back into the team, and I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, and I think people will point to Ben White as a pushback to that, which I don't know if is completely fair given the context of the injuries at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think whilst he's not been perfect, he's taken probably the biggest step forward in his coaching development of using the squad. And I mean, we needed it, didn't we, Rohan? I mean, let's be honest. We recruited a squad at the beginning of the season in which we've given him the tools. And if he hadn't shown those things, I'd be asking and being much more critical and vocal about it, because we've got a squad to use it. There was no need to continue that level of management. And I think you bring a good point, because there was times in which we were sharing stats that I think something like 8 or 9 of Arsenal starting 11 had the most minutes of anybody in the league as far as squad usage. Mikel definitely had a point to prove there, and I think he's done a very good job of that this season. I think that there's moments, I think really Norgard is probably one of the most consistent players that I've just not understood that usage quite well, but generally speaking, he's taken huge steps forward, huge steps of improvement towards fixing that. And I think in the context of our title rivals, I think this is worth discussing. I mean, I look at Liverpool, who have had a huge injury crisis actually approaching our game. If you look at it, there's quite a few people that are out for our game. And I'm wondering how our surrounding people are handling change. I look at Chelsea, some of the turmoil that's going down there with a recent sacking of Maresca. I look at the recent sacking of Amorim. I look at the rumors, and Slot hasn't been safe. People have asked for his potential sacking. There's rumors of Pep potentially going out. As far as even Thomas Frank, for goodness sake, also hasn't been free from the sacking talk. I mean, of the top 6, how much is the stability of Arsenal's personnel responsible for some of the ability to handle variation, in your opinion? And was that not spoken about enough in the summer as a factor? For as much as we spent, that this core has been together for years. And, the surrounding change in a lot of the top 6 was really quite big. And I mean, we're still seeing it continue into this season. How much do you think that's going to be a factor in any potential title race or second half of the season?
I think it's big, I mean, there's a question on this squad as well about, what we're seeing from, the so-called big 6 and the instability there. And it kind of makes me, I've always said, I feel very grateful in terms of the situation that I find myself in with the football club. And obviously, when we go to a tribal matter, it's always a case of trophies. Mikel's not won anything, etc., yada, yada, yada. But I think, there's a lot of luck involved as well in this, isn't there, George? Because it's like we were lucky, in a sense, to strike on Mikel when we got him. And we have also a massive credit to the board to stick by him and to give us that stability. That needs to be mentioned, right? Because, and again, this is kind of, we'll do questions at the end, but there's a good question on Discord in terms of, teams following the Arsenal model in terms of what we've done with Mikel. It's not normal what we've done. And you can't just look at our situation, look at how we've grew every single season and then try and replicate that. Because 1, you need to find the right person. 2, you need to have the patience. And 3, it's a case of when it does go a little bit hostile, do you back yourself in terms of the decision-making that you did to back that guy? Because that's what the other clubs are not doing. But it's a case of the other clubs, they've not been able to get the right candidate. They've also not had the trust. And then there's also the fan pressure as well in terms of some of the entitlement. Like, for example, Manchester United, they've sacked Ruben Amorim, right? Manchester United are a club with incredible history. And the fans still will feel entitled to trophies, to the big honours, but they're a million miles away from it. And that pressure of every single time a manager comes in and they're not hitting that level, and I know the level that they're hitting right now is ridiculously low. They finished 15th last season, but this season they've got a better chance of finishing in one of those top 5 places. But the standards that they set there with the entitlement prevents the managers coming in from being able to really build as well. Now, I'm not saying Ruben Amorim was the right person, but I'm saying anybody coming in there, it's a really difficult job to do. And I think that's where I'm really happy with the stability that we've seen at our club. And the faith that we've shown in Mikel, because we are reaping the rewards from it. Look at the players, as you mentioned, the core group, and how it is not normal for players, the likes of Gabriel, the likes of Odegaard, the likes of Saka, Saliba, and whatnot. We've had 2 proper title races, and then there's obviously last season as well. But we include that season because they're obviously here, and we've not won anything. To keep players motivated and re-signed is a huge statement. I don't think that is acknowledged enough, because naturally what happens at a club is if you are in a title race and you are not able to get over the line over 2 years, there's naturally going to be doubt in players' mind thinking, is this the right, are we doing things the right way? Is this the best, most optimum approach in terms of going for a title? You don't see that with these players. They are fully bought into the idea and the methodology that is in place, and that's not normal. And I think we should be really proud of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just something that I thought of as we're talking, because, I look around us and everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
All these clubs will want to preach stability and, this is going to sound super arrogant, but mate, having gone through Mikel and Mikel's journey, I can almost objectively look at other clubs and see whether or not they're doing the right things from a pure process standpoint. And the clarity of vision that we've been able to show and the steadfast trust, it's not easy. There was a point in time in which Mikel was losing 8-9 games. We went through our period of the poor form and the club held strong. And I look at the Amorim thing, and you talk about it again. I don't believe in Ruben Amorim, but you can't tell me logically that you can stick with somebody through your worst historical season in the Premier League, and then 4 or 5 months later, when they're in 5th, have such a disagreement that you're firing them.
Exactly.
It's not a good look in logical stuff from the outset. I don't care whether or not, I don't believe he was good enough to be hired, period.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's the logic of why are you firing somebody that is objectively doing well? There is disharmony there. There isn't a clarity of vision. You jump down to Maresca, who, by the way, yes, is he perfect? No, but he objectively won them a trophy, got them Champions League football ahead of the process in which they thought they were going to do. And now 4 or 5 months later, they've fallen out with the directors. And for all of our issues, because we aren't perfect, we always look at other people and we start to see the flaws in somebody else because it makes ourselves feel good. But objectively, Arsenal haven't got, in my opinion, the praise that they deserve. Classic. But in terms of being able to hold to a vision and be steadfast when you get punched in the face, because everything hasn't been perfect here. And by the way, we still haven't even reached the end goal. We talk about all this and, this is the season for trophies, make no mistake about it. However, I look at other people panicking. That's what I see. I don't see a unified vision. And what do I see about my team? This is the calmest, most composed Arsenal team I've seen under Mikel, where there is a steadfast authority to how we're carrying things out that I don't think has been always the case with Arsenal teams. Even as far as last year, I don't think I saw this consistent calmness in the way that people and Mikel and everybody speaks about what we need to do this season. There is less of a, I need to compete, I need to prove myself, and more of a, no, we're going to do it. We have an exact plan about how we need to do it. We need to focus on ourselves. And that's beyond media training. You look at all our rivals and there is disarray in vision. And so whoever's responsible for that, because I don't think it's just Mikel, there needs to be a case for the owners getting some praise.
Absolutely.
Having to do that, because you can have all of the trust in the world, but when it's going wrong, mate, just look to our corner, look at what our rivals have been doing. And You have a look at Manchester City. They're in an injury crisis. What do? They're looking at Mark Gahey. They had one last year. They spent nearly £150 million last year, people forget, in January.
They have spent we've approached now last year's January market, then the summer window, now we've got this January window. The narrative now is about Arsenal in terms of, well, they've got all this depth and all this quality, and it's projecting that opinion in negative light, suggesting that Arsenal's spending a ridiculous amount of money. But when you compare it to our competitors, since last January, Man City have spent more than us. Chelsea have spent more than us. Liverpool have spent more than us. I think Manchester United have spent more than us. These are clubs that have all spent more than us. The difference is that we went with a specific approach in terms of contingency, in terms of beefing up the squad with more quality, adding depth that can challenge the first team. And that's the big reason why we are where we are right now. So I'm not hearing this spending talk. That doesn't mean Arsenal are paupers. We have spent money. But when you compare it to our competitors, and you compare to the fact that Man City are going to spend 60-odd million on Semenyo, they're going to most likely spend money on Mark Guehi as well. If not Mark Guehi, somebody else to address the injuries that they've suffered with Josko Gvardiol and the uncertainty of Ruben Diaz as well. It's not consistent. That's the thing that I don't understand. You're not being logical with throwing that opinion of Arsenal spending when since Mikel has came to the club as well, and bearing in mind the squad that he inherited, we spent less than Chelsea, we spent less than Man United, we spent less than Man City. Liverpool, we spent more than, but look at the squad that Liverpool had when Mikel came. The Alissons, the Van Dijks, the Fabinhos, they're all there. Mane, Salah, prime team, ready to go. There's a lot of context here, and that's why I think, the spending talk, I just don't.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to digest as a whole. And again, we aren't perfect. I'm not far from George screaming into a mic saying no forward in 2024. We have not been perfect. But I do think as a whole, when you look at it, there's going to be a lesson that is only going to be realized in hindsight and confirmed with trophies, to be fair. But you have a look at the way that Arsenal have rebuilt. Every club in world football want to do that, want to achieve that, and very few achieve it. Very few achieve that stability. And I mean, Mikel's leaning on, now it's going to be approaching, how long has it been? Has it been 5 and a bit years? Near on 6 years at the club?
6 year. Sixth season, yeah.
So you're looking at 6 years. In modern football, that's old.
Yeah.
That is very old. As far as managerial trust and what that looks like moving forward. And I know that there was a little bit of an article from Gunner Blog about Mikel's future and going forward, but I don't think that you're able to sign and confirm clarity with players if the club doesn't have a vision. And I don't think it's one person. So I think as far as clarity of vision goes, just to tie up that segment, it's been really good to see from Arsenal's perspective, and, long may it continue. I think as we move in, we just want to really briefly touch on Bournemouth. I know me and Rohan were here on the IR, so there's not too much that I want to go beyond. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you about Bournemouth and about what we've learned from Bournemouth is we were able to show kind of a consistency in our second half performance that I think has been a thread of Arsenal the entirety of this season. What do you put down our performances first half to second half to? And I'm sure that there might be questions about that, in the Discord, but it is something that I think I've seen.
Yeah.
And I have some thoughts on to why and what we're doing. But do you at all see like a major intent or a common pattern as far as the second half resurgence and also the conceding of chances?
Yeah.
Are they linked together? Just being a bit more ambitious? Is it intentional from Mikel? Or do you feel it's just variance that, we're looking at a 4-month sample, and that's the case now? We might be looking and saying something different come March or April.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that Arsenal going there with the mindset of first half, play it
don't
easy,
perform, and then second half perform.
Second half, just do the goods. No, I think what it is there's a lot of nuance in modern day football that isn't considered. Certain things that are happening, small-sided games, mini battles that are occurring, that we develop more information about as the game progresses, right? And that's where in the second half there will be things that they spot, small little adjustments that the opposition's making that perhaps that they didn't necessarily think that they were going to do beforehand that we then look to exploit more in the second half. That's for me one of the big ones. Like against Aston Villa, for example, I spoke a bit about it on TCP Live. In the first half, they did something very interesting where Bukayo Saka had his fewest number of touches starting from the get-go in a game this season. It was 26 touches in total in that match. The reason why that was happening is because Luca Digne was cheating really far towards the touchline every single time to deny him from having space. Now that meant that the space between Luca Digne and Lindelof was really big, but we didn't exploit that in the first half. Second half, straight away, in the 46th minute, William Saliba hits a ball into that channel. Gyökeres does well to hold it. We win the corner, and the resulting corner, we score. It's certain things like that we just do a little bit more of in the second half that we didn't necessarily do in the first half. Against Bournemouth, there was some interesting quotes from Declan Rice afterwards where he said, and he was asked, it was Paul Mersing asking him about the first half and the differences in the second half. And Rice said, in the first half, we were doing the things Bournemouth wanted. We kept playing the ball to our left-hand side and they trapped us. In the second, and statistically, in that game, from Mark Stats, Arsenal had 29 possession losses in the entire game against Bournemouth in what is deemed as danger zone, sort of close-ish to your own goal, stretching near to the halfway line as well. In the second half, we didn't lose the ball as much as we did in the first half. We didn't constantly play down the left-hand side and for them to trap us. That's a big difference, but that's something that I think was frustrating to me because teams naturally, they will try and pressure us into playing towards our left-hand side, but we didn't execute the principles to allow us to attack the right-hand side more of in that first half, in my opinion. And also, we spoke about in the IR as well, the technical level of the team was really bad in the first half. It was really bad. Zubimendi in particular, I think Zubimendi is crazy because his second half performance was elite. His first half performance was a nonsense, So it's certain things like that are happening, which, naturally you think to yourself, look at the pattern. There's a trend. Atletico Madrid smashed 4 goals. Bayern Munich managing to get the 2 goals in that half to win that game. Against Sunderland, a massive change in the second half. Against Newcastle, we obviously get the 2 goals late on. There's a big pattern there that's developing, but it's not intentional. I think Arsenal, Aston Villa, obviously, the big one. I think what it's a case of is we're trying to find solutions, we're trying to develop more information, and we're processing that. Then we're getting back into the dressing room. More information is being given, and then that's where you start to see us exploit more advantages. That's what I think it is. So
I tend to agree with you, and it's more of a case for me when I look at some of this stuff that I'd like us to be more intentional. I think I'm seeing a pattern and I'm looking at it. I'd probably like us to be a bit more intentional with our subs. It's also, Rohan, the first time that we've actually seen an entire frontline change from Arsenal this season. And as far as, the first front line, some may argue there was a lot of runners. I have been famous in terms of, I like simple rules. I think football is a simple game. In my front line, I like 2 runners and 2 passers. Really, quite simply. And I think if you don't strike that balance, you at times can leave yourself in trouble. And, I think neither front line, if I'm being really honest with you, had that balance. You've got kind of Martinelli, Gyökeres, Madueke front line that are all runners, and then substitute that with a Trossard, Jesus, and Saka front line that are all ball to feet. And, mate, I don't know, I didn't really say this on the IR, but I walked away thinking, Jesus, is Mikel treating this as a training game? Have we got to the point in which our forward department is that stacked from a fitness perspective? Because we haven't had that all season. That we're looking at trying to develop relationships. The first one was just to get minutes, but now I'm thinking we haven't had the intention rotation that the defense has had. Because the defense has been recruited to a point in which we've got nearly every profile there, at this point, right? And I'm just wondering, with people coming back, do you feel like the fitness of the forward line is going to change how we play? Because I don't know if I saw a change in play in Bournemouth, but when's the last time we've done 3 subs in the front line and completely swapped a front line? And I think things like that, complete pod changes, let's call it. So not necessarily the front line, but maybe a pod of 3. And, you mentioned games within a game. I know I had once asked Mikel this question about a finisher. I think the next evolution of this team and this squad is we're playing a certain way. let me take out a pod to do a specific task that is responsible for, I don't know, exploiting more of a touchline angle. So for example, I'll give one, you look at a Martinelli type of winger, and maybe that means more of a Miles type of left back, and more of a box crashing midfield option, like maybe a Kai Havertz type of someone that stretches, and that's a pod. And then you look at somebody that maybe wants to control more of the ball, and maybe you are talking about employing a little bit more of a kind of more ball to feet pod. On the right, you're looking at an Odegaard, Saka, Timber to lock it down. But if we want to maybe exploit and do a little bit more running, maybe you've got, a Madueke on the outside, Timber, and then maybe an Eze on the right. Like, can Arsenal essentially use more larger sub in moments with the type of squad that we had? Because we've kind of just been doing one or two subs at this point, only to stave injury and be in response to injury. But I don't know. I wonder, do you over-index? Am I over-indexing it? Do you feel like moving forward, the Arsenal team could look at substitutions as more of a group dynamic as opposed to one-to-one?
Most certainly. I think maybe it'll be more of a case of when we have bigger leads in games, we could see that occur more. I found it interesting in this game where the game was at 2-1, right? And he makes the 3 changes. So if the game is not done.
It's not.
So that's what I found interesting because, I feel with Mikel making that number of changes when we're 2-1 up across the front line,
It's a lot of change, Rohan. It's 3 substitutes. Like, you're talking about departments, right? Sorry, just to interject.
No,
For me, I think when I look at team chemistry, okay, and even substitutions, you can substitute too much. Like, one of the criticisms is that Mikel doesn't change enough of our dynamics when things aren't going our way in the second half. However, you can also go the complete other way in which you change far too much, and then the message becomes confusing, right? And in theory, if I'm being fair, 3 within the same third of the pitch is the definition of significant change, right? Yeah. And so I'm wondering, is the modern football maybe way to combat some of that, looking at it from pods where you can still do larger substitutions of maybe 2 or 3, but they don't all happen in the front line or in the midfield line or in the defense? Maybe some of your substitutions that are related to one another, the kind of chemistry component can be staved by having one out in each of the attacking midfield or defensive lines. Or George is completely wrong, and that's modern football. That you're going to get to the point in which you're going to need rotation in every single line. Like, where do you stand on, I guess, the future of substitutions? Are they still going to be 1-to-1? Or with the impact of more games, more fitness concerns, are coaches going to have to be flexible and evolve to the point that pods and groups of people are going to have to be substituted for specific goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more games and the more, fitness-related worries and apprehension on that front could certainly pave the way for more of that. I think it will be interesting to see where, for example, let's say, because when you see a fullback go off, it's usually because they're on a yellow card, right? Or unless they're having a stinker. They're having a stinker or a yellow card. But would you be brave enough to take a fullback off who's playing well? He's not on a yellow card, but you're just changing it for a certain dynamic. That's something that we haven't necessarily seen. We've looked at the front line, but when you're looking at pods, so when we talk about the left-hand side, you're looking at the left winger, the left central midfielder, and the left back. Would we change in-game then to take off, I don't know, a Calafiori because we feel we want a bit more consistency in terms of running on the outside? You go for a Hincapié. Would we do something like that in the context of a Calafiori not being on a yellow card, not having a stinker? So that's something I'm unsure of. I'd be interested to see if it does happen. But in terms of rotation, mate, Mikel has been doing it this season. Like, Bukayo Saka has, when we had 3 games in a week, he's not started him in all 3 games. There's always been one game which he's put him on the bench. Against Club Brugge, he was on the bench. Madueke started. Against Bournemouth, obviously in the weekend, Madueke started. Against Brentford, Madueke started as well. So there is more there and this goes back to the trust point of view in terms of trusting the squad that you have. and certain personnel. But yeah, I felt, just to quickly go back to that trio, I felt we controlled the game a lot better, when they came on, to be honest. I know, obviously, they got that goal to make it 3-2, but if you look at how we managed it, and I know I've spoken a lot about in terms of 1-goal leads going into the final 10 or so minutes, you leave yourself to variance. But if we just look at our performance in that final stretch after we concede that goal, brilliant. Controlled it so well. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think, well, there's something to be said, because there was I thought there was maybe a lack of intention, but maybe I've overlooked some of that, because that whole ball to feet front line, while it didn't maybe have the balance, it contributed to the increased possessional control that we showed post that. And, that absolutely, to me, mate, it is intentional. I remember having arguments with people about Bournemouth right before, where I said, like, listen, I think Bournemouth are going to press, guys. And I think they're going to press very hard. Like, look at what happened with Manchester City. I think they will come onto the halfway line. And in fact, I think it makes sense to have your Gyökereses and your transition forwards there, because the space is going to be behind them.
Yeah.
And then to close the game, when you've got your lead, to now control the ball. Sorry, mate, from a bird's eye view, that looks like a very mature tactical plan to me. And I think...
It was very Man City-esque, George. I think it was very Man City-esque in their... Honestly, I'd urge people to watch back that final 10 minutes. And Mikel Merino deserves a massive shout-out as well, because when he came on, he was crisp and clean on the ball. Decision-making was spot on. The only person I'd say, although he should have got that foul from, I can't remember who, it might have been Senesi, who brings him down. I thought Gabriel Jesus was loose. But yeah, I thought we really did control it well. And I think there's an idea there for sure.
Yeah, and so I think... Yeah, maybe to close that out, I think that this is not the first time, nor is it the last time, that I anticipate 3-person subs. And I actually think that moving forward, especially with the squad, I know we can't say it, so knock on all the wood, but we are getting more fit, mate. We are getting more fit. There's Calafiori is the only one that's like a couple weeks away, really, as far as major injury goes. And I think the story of the second half of our season, to be fair, is not just injured players returning, but I think Mikel may be paving the way to larger scale substitutions. I'm talking more 2 to 3 groups, and I think that's going to become more common moving forward. It's going to evolve, mate. Like, the schedule's too hard.
Yeah.
And when you have a look at it, the reason I think that I'm going so hard is did you see the recent article that Madueke talked to, I believe, SR Collins, about his relationship with Bukayo Saka, and how both domestic and at club level, this is a childhood friend that's now his competition. And, I don't think you can sell a Madueke without being honest in that. And I think that this whole substitute debate, because again, Mikel hasn't been good at it. So I want to put that context. I mean, for God's sakes, the whole Ramsdale Raya thing was a huge topic of conversation within our fan base. But when you look at the quality of a Madueke and a Saka, the only way that's going to be sustainable is with more larger scale pod substitutions. It can't be just, I'm going to do one person for cups and one person for another
exactly.
thing.
You need to give them the trust in all competitions. That's why I think it's very important. And obviously Madueke is not, and the same with Eze obviously as well, in terms of the last 4 Premier League games, he's not had any minutes. But and there's reasons for that. I kind of looked at the numbers in terms of his minutes he's had at Crystal Palace at this point.
Said it in the IR.
Yeah, and we kind of had we kind of like made an educated guess, really, didn't we? We said Crystal Palace playing 1 game a week, playing the Carabao Cup, versus Eze now at Arsenal, Champions League, Carabao Cup, Premier League. I looked at the actual numbers, and he's played, I think it was like maybe like a little bit more for Palace, a little bit more, but the intensity at Arsenal, but it's very similar. So there's no worry I have there. And Madueke, like we just said, he started against Brentford, he started against Bournemouth, right? These are things in the past in which Bukayo Saka would have been playing in. He would have been starting. So I think that's really important for sure. I'm managing that cohesion there, because as much as they're childhood friends, they both want to play football. They both want to be felt like they're trusted. And if you just throw a Madueke for the Carabao Cup and say, they're your minutes, and you're just going to come off the bench in the Premier League, what message does that send? He's not an idiot, is he? So, yeah. And ironically, that's how you avoid injury.
Exactly. So again, I want to keep maintaining, I think the newest form for fans kind of to understand with injury is going to not be from total minutes garnered. it's going to be from intensity.
Yeah.
And I think trying to minimize the almost flat of not playing to high intense demand. And that swing is probably the most important fitness concern that sports science will look at trying to mitigate, as opposed to the schedule, because mate, the schedule is ridiculous. It objectively is going to injure people. Like we've already decided that money's more important. So I think it'll be less about saying, okay, the load is ridiculous, I can't change it. The schedule's not going to be drawn back. We've already increased games. We've already shown lesser recovery timelines, despite everybody and their nan saying this is too much. We haven't listened. So let's move on from that fact. And I think building squads that are able to pod more, and you kind of clown the Chelseas of this world who have spent like that but not employed it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, again, just to kind of tie that loop from our earlier discussion, this is just another example that I think we'll see more sample of. This is my theory, let's say. My theory in the second half of the season is that we're going to see a little bit more 2 to 3 person subs at the same time, and less because of a response to injury, but more from proactive small games within a game. And those finishers will be from a pod perspective, trying to achieve a common goal, like let's dominate possession. Let's isolate the right-hand side with a little bit more transition power, but make the left maybe a little bit more ball to feet. Let's try to use the squad in that way, so that we're not just saying you start one game, I start another, and the intensity that's spread between the squad has a higher baseline, if that makes sense, as opposed to stop, start. Because actually the stop, start is what promotes injury.
Yeah, and we're keeping players warm as well. That's key. Keep
Yes.
everyone warm so they can go hard as they get in. And maybe that's where people will be a little bit frustrated with the lack of Eze game time, because he hasn't been warm in recent games. But overall, I think if we look at the players that we have, we're keeping players warm, and I think that's key in terms of being able to achieve a baseline performance as well. I think in the past, Mikel, and it goes back to the squad trust, really, you'll throw a player on, they've not played for a while, and we can't expect them to then just click. They're not robots. They need time.
Yeah.
Some players need time to be able to build that rhythm and that momentum. Definitely good on that front.
I mean, Arsenal have been building momentum quite a bit, but somebody who hasn't is Liverpool,
Hey.
who have gone off the boil the last week in terms of dropping some points, and I just wanted to have a little Liverpool preview. Rowan, this is a big game. And
I'll slap them up.
Can I tell you something? Oh my God. You know how you were against Villa and Emery? I hate Slot. I hate him so much. This is such an unspoken thing. I find him so arrogant.
Yeah.
Arnie Slot. I really don't like him. I have to be honest. And I really want to lay a marker and just slap right there, right in the back of the neck is what I want to do to that boy. One of those, okay? And I want to little boy him. I think this is a very important game, beyond my irrational hatred for Arnie Slot. I think that title rivals and the ability to squeeze on the neck of your contenders, there isn't much grace that you can get given, not much media narrative, and not much public adulation that comes from a proper spanking of a title rival, and what that can do to a squad. And I think that, mate, we're in a moment. We have spanked Villa. We have really done well to dominate, I believe, Bournemouth, where the 3-2 scoreline is quite beneficial to Bournemouth on a couple chances. But for the most part, I think we were quite dominant. In this way, we have done really well to have a real good spike in our central progression. And mate, Liverpool are horrible with tracking runners through the middle of the park. I think there's an opportunity to really lay down a marker and really exploit that team. Really quickly, can you maybe just tell me, am I off as far as the tracking of runners and kind of the blindside runners? Like, where do you think the biggest issues have fallen for Liverpool? Of course, they've got the issues in the front line. We've talked at length about some of the balance earlier in the season. But as far as what you've seen in the last 4.5-5 months, have they addressed any of those concerns? What's the biggest way to maybe hurt Liverpool and why they've struggled?
I think you can really exploit them out wide in the fullback areas, like massively. You're talking about, if we look at their options, they've got Robertson, Kirkez, Bradley, and Frimpong. None of those players fill you with confidence that they can really dominate their channel without the ball. None of them. Robertson in his peak day for sure, but Robertson has passed his peak, massively past his peak. There's a lot of joy there, especially centrally as well. I think, I've always felt as good as Ryan Gravenberch has been, I don't think he is a natural defensive midfielder. When you're tasking him to be on an island, I don't believe Gravenberch is able to hold the fort down. The centre-backs, I think, irrespective of... Konate's picked it up for sure, but, Konate and Van Dijk, they're strong. Strong centre. That's their strong point, alongside an Alisson. But I think you can still hurt them, but you can especially hurt them out wide. And I think, and we may potentially be able to, do a little bit more in the Liverpool game on a different time. But I think, for me, what's key as well is the health of our squad, which we've mentioned, but also, we played on Saturday against Bournemouth. And the game comes on Thursday. A lot of time there before we go into that fixture. So we're going to be fresh. There's going to be a lot of things happening in the background in terms of there's going to be a massive fan spectacle that's going to be occurring before the match. We didn't do that against Aston Villa because who cares about Aston Villa? We'll slap them up anyway without any tifo or whatnot. And then we play Portsmouth, obviously, on the weekend. So I think there's a really good opportunity here to go fully hard on this game. And bearing in mind, we've played on this lot 3 times now. We've not won.
Yeah.
We've not won, so there's that element to it as well. But yeah, I fancy us, mate. I fancy us to do something special, yeah.
Oh, mate, and you know what? I draw a lot of similarities because Emery's another one of those that we haven't done well.
Yeah,
against. Like, that slapping was well due. And I think that it's less about being worried about Liverpool's ability to get back in a race and more about sending a message. And I think that the one criticism I could have of Arsenal is that we have to fight for every win. And I just want to step on someone's throat. Like, I want to kill people. Like, I want to get to the point. Pause. Like, not like that. It's more of a sense of I really want us to start bullying teams where we bully them physically, but the score lines don't always reflect the dominance that we show.
Yeah.
And I want to get to a point in which there is that fear factor because we are creating to the point that it deserves that fear factor, if that makes sense. Like, we're creating in such a sustainable way, in such a large manner, in such a dominant manner that I'd like it to translate to fear and to goals. And I don't think it will ever come to 1 or 2 teams, but I look at the Pep teams and there was just this acceptance that no matter how bad they played, there was an inevitability to their goal.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we've quite got that. I think there's an inevitability that Arsenal will dominate the game. There's an inevitability that they will physically outmatch 95% of their opposition and they will camp in the final third. But the inevitability of a goal breeds from large 3-4-0 score lines. And, I really would love to channel our inner Kai Havertz Dubai moment in which we started slapping teams up post Dubai like 3-4-0 in a more consistent manner, and none more so than Arne Slot deserves that absolute pamming. Anyways, ignoring that irrational outburst, we're going to head to your questions. So guys, a reminder again that you guys can get priority access to those questions only by joining the Discord and as well becoming a member of the Can Podcast, which of course you can do on YouTube or on Patreon with links down below. Also, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe if you like all that stuff. I know we don't really ask it enough, but we do love it and we do really appreciate it. And it does help out the channel. So if you guys do enjoy the content that we're producing, make sure to go check that out. We've got a lot of stuff this week coming up. We're going to do a youth pod on Igor, by the way, some of those things. So look out for that. We've got a couple more stuff coming as far as instant reactions. We'll probably do some transfer related shows at some point, given that we have a window that I'm not sure we'll be active in, but we will definitely be doing some transfer related shows. And of course, we've got Scout and all that good stuff. So, and TCP Live as well to return to you. Tons of brilliant initiatives. But Rohan, I will go to you first.
Yes.
As far as a question goes, and then we'll go a little bit back and forth, and we'll do that for a bit. So, do you have a question ready?
Absolutely. Straight on the Discord with the main man, Dinny, as always active. We love Dinny. We have 4 away games in 9 days starting against Portsmouth. Yep. No doubt we'll rotate. But which of the 4 fixtures would you prioritise in terms of strength in lineup? So the fixtures, I believe, are against Portsmouth, Chelsea, Forest,
and Inter.
Yeah, and Inter. I mean, Portsmouth, Yeah, rotating there.
What's the okay? This is naive foreign fan. How far is Portsmouth? Like as far as a game goes and travel? Is it close or
not too bad for Arsenal. It would be bad for me, to be honest. I think it's near Southampton actually.
Because people said that as far as the away day goes, but again, can you read those out again? I'm pretty sure like Chelsea's close, Portsmouth's pretty close, Inter's obviously far. That's a trip, but.
Yeah.
Like, what's the distance look like on those away days?
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to look where Portsmouth is again because I've never been Portsmouth, to be honest. Where is Portsmouth? On the south coast. Yeah, it's on the south coast. So it's like, instantly someone in the comments, Rowan doesn't know his geography. Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't know about Portsmouth, but it's like from North London to like Bournemouth, for example.
So, I mean, 3 of those 4 aren't crazy distances as far as travel times go. So it's actually, despite it being like something weird, like it's the first time that there's been 4 away fixtures in 4 different competitions or something like that. There's some weird stat that everybody likes to quote. It is odd to have 4 away days, but I think as a whole, just because that travel, I thought the travel wasn't big, I'm actually not too afraid about the impact of it. But there is more of a thread to be pulled, in my opinion, about how many hard away games we have already played and who's left. Because I think Sky Sports had put out a chart about the remaining away fixtures that Arsenal have, and I think really there's basically Brighton and Manchester City that are in the top 8, in my opinion, that we have left currently. I mean, that can obviously be subject to change, but for the most part, we're talking about teams outside the top 8 that we have left as far as our away day fixtures go. Is there anything to be said about Arsenal's completeness of away day fixtures and what Man City still have to travel to, which is quite significant? I mean, they've got quite a few top 6, top 8 teams and stadiums still to go to. Is that going to be a factor for you in the title race?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, Man City got to go to Anfield. They've got to go to
Spurs.
We have to go to Spurs as well, to be fair. But they've also got to go to Stamford Bridge. They've got to go to Old Trafford, which is happening very soon as well. Got to go to Bournemouth, mate. This is the strength of the league, right? Bournemouth will win this in 10. Yeah. Bournemouth are a good team, man. Honestly, they're a good team. Like they're solid. So yeah, I mean, I think that's massive, and to further compound that, the number of fixtures that are occurring every single week, it's huge. Just to go back on the question in terms of prioritizing rotation, I mean, Portsmouth, obviously, naturally, we're going to rotate there big time. And that shouldn't be a problem, he says. And then we've got Chelsea midweek, and we both said it in the previous main pod in terms of the putting emphasis on the Carabao Cup and the momentum that can give us going into the second half of the season. I think that's certainly one in which I'm looking to go much stronger in. Obviously, Nottingham Forest on the weekend, much stronger in. And Inter, maybe one in which we can certainly experiment a little bit more, but also Mikel's all about earning the right to win. And sometimes, fans will, and it was like the Bayern Munich example, right? Because that was sandwiched in between Spurs and Chelsea. And people were saying, throw away the Bayern game because we're already in a healthy position. No, you don't know Mikel. Mikel's not going to throw away this game because it's a big game and he'll want to showcase how good this team is against the best. And he will try and do that against Inter Milan as well. But I'm certainly, in terms of like priority for me, Chelsea and Forest in particular.
Forest is a big game. I think... the rotation conversation is going to be there because it's a kind of almost a really difficult fixture list until I'd say Manchester United, which is roughly on the 29th. Like we've got the next 3 weeks in this month of January really to contend with, don't we? And so it's kind of the case of making sure that we provide the rotation that we really have been going with. I don't know if I'm really particular about things. The only thing is I will say, because we haven't seen it, is Eze does need to return in this stretch of games. Like if it gets to the point in which we're talking at the end of January, that's more than just 2-3 weeks. And there's probably a conversation that needs to be had. If I'm being really fair, like at this current moment in time, it's not a big impact. But I would say if we past January after this fixture list and we're not talking about certain things. That's despite form of Trossard and Odegaard. Like, there's room there. I don't think anybody would say that we're stretching on to nearly 6 weeks of not seeing a lot of Eze. Like, that's significant. So I think he's probably one player I look at. I look at Norgard. It's another player that I think if I'm really isolating players that I'd like to see, because that situation has kind of confused me a bit. And I'd say the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly is something that I'm looking at as wanting to see a bit more of, broadly speaking. Like, those are 3 in the squad. There's a question on Ethan. I think as far as what we do and whether or not a loan, I think I've been screaming the Bournemouth loan for the better part of months at this point. But I think there's questions there for sure between Ethan, Miles, Norgard, and Eze. I think those are probably the biggest questions in the squad as far as rotation goes. So have a look at that. And I think, Reg, just to double check, we didn't really see your question, but we did address the entire first half or second half question that you've had in the Discord. So I know a lot of people wanted to see that answered. So hopefully you found that in the earlier part of the pod. But Rohan, do you have another question ready for me? Because I've got one.
I do, and it's not a very popular one in the Discord. I'm seeing a lot of emojis left, right, and centre from our boy Nick. We love Nick again. I saw this and thought, goodness me, there's a lot of
response.
Yes. And maybe people were a bit frustrated with this message, but nah, it's all good. Do you guys find Martin Zubimendi to be a little bit underwhelming thus far? I feel most matches I want more, particularly from a creative standpoint in terms of passing, tempo dictation, and interceptions. And sometimes he looks even just fully overwhelmed. I mean, maybe, when we're talking about... I personally think Zubimendi's been a fantastic signing. I think the impact he's had has been profound. I think he's settled in brilliantly. What I will say, though, is his level did dip, I would say, slightly post Villa Park. We saw a dip in Zubimendi's performances, but then Bournemouth away in particular, and especially in the second half against Aston Villa as well, he really looked strong. But overall, I've been really happy with Zubimendi. I think it goes back to the Norgard question, though. I think sometime in the period in which Zubimendi had a little bit of a dip, I felt that his energy levels weren't there. And I felt a Norgard could have certainly given us something in that period. And that's where there could be certainly some criticism to Mikel, especially what we've seen from Norgard.
Not to put words in people's mouths, but I think also part of Nick's feeling was also the profile of what Zubimendi was. And I think we've seen it a lot more in the last month or two. But I remember screaming to anyone who would listen that Zubimendi needs to be looked at through the lens of a Gundogan profile, and you're going to start to see a major versatility with him that I think is starting to really blossom in the last month, really. Like, when the team has sparked creatively, it's been not just because of Martin Odegaard's form. I think it's because it's been Zubimendi who has pushed up a little bit higher as well, hasn't been as focused about being in deeper positions. And I think us seeing that utility is going to be an impact. I look at Zubimendi and I think this is a guy that's played arguably one of the most minutes in the squad in a new league, and whose physical questions were always going to be maybe the only thing you can question, i.e. running back to goal and kind of those things and eating big space, but hasn't been completely outmaneuvered in that regard at all. And I think he's walked in and changed Arsenal's ability to control tempo. And it's been really evident. And if anything, I think he deserves praise for how consistent he's been as a signing. There is an argument for me for being the best performing signing as a whole since he's entered. And he's probably also one of the few signings that I've seen, by the way, walk in from La Liga and dominate games in the Premier League. That's not an adaptation that I think has been largely fruitful in kind of the last 2-3 years of the Premier League. So it was absolutely not a given. I mean, this is a high quality player, and you just needed to see the types of teams that were in for him and the entire saga that he produced, right? So I know that he was a quality player, but we've seen plenty of quality players come to the Premier League and not perform, and he has performed from the get-go. Yeah. I definitely think when he loses a step physically, his technical level goes, which is logical of any player that's been maybe overplayed, So I actually think they've been the best performing pivot in the league. So
hands down.
For me, I have zero questions about Martin Zubimendi, probably because I expected him to have a little bit more versatility going forward. I mean, if you wanted him to be more of an anchor that is more of a Jorginho, the Pirlo and those things, then I think you may be disappointed in what you wanted to see, but as far as his actual performance goes, his consistency and those things, I think he's been unbelievable. And I think there's a lot more to glean from his offensive potential. There's definitely going to be things that we find out, because I think as this team dominates a bit more and he's going to find himself in more areas to crash the box, I think Martin Zubimendi is going to show us a level of final third entry that, again, is very Gundogan-esque. And, you know, that's just only going to improve with more dominance and more forward competency. You know, I think I look at Kai Havertz and the impact that we've said that he could potentially have on Gyökeres. I actually look at it also on the impact on the midfield. Yeah. Having those kind of forwards in, I think, is going to change a lot of what's been said, both from an Eze perspective as well as Martin Zubimendi. These are players that I think that give us a level of cuteness in the final third that we haven't had in the squad. Pocket players that are comfy in the fire, that can receive in pockets high with pressure behind. Like, there is also an opening potentially to your Miles, to your Ethan. Like, the squad has these pocket players, but we haven't always shown them in their greatest light, have we? Like, a lot of our midfield success has come from more Martin Odegaard, who likes to drop out of the block. But as far as pocket players go, that is something that I think maybe as a midfield profile we haven't seen thrive necessarily as much in an Arsenal shirt. And I think it's something that we will be seeing going forward. So, yeah, I don't know if I quite agree that I think he's been underwhelmed. I think he's been brilliant. And I think that there's a lot more to glean. But I do agree that when he drops off physically, his technical level does seem to go. And it can be pretty drastic. Like that first half to Bournemouth, I don't want to underplay. It was quite poor. And, you know, he really was at fault for it. But it's just so weird because his superpower are those things. So I'd actually go to the point of when I start seeing Zubimendi playing like that, I realize how tired he is more than it being a conscious choice. So, yeah, that's what I would say as far as Zubimendi goes.
I agree, mate. I agree completely.
So I've got a question, and it's an interesting question. It's from D. Mitko. A little bit of a longer question, but despite his fantastic form for Arsenal this season, should Leandro Trossard be sold in the summer? I think we all would expect it on the left wing for there to be kind of a purchase. It could be overcrowded. Is there a need for Leandro Trossard? When by that point we will have had an Eze who has been accustomed to the out-of-possession work, and considering that Trossard's value could be at an all-time high. This is a controversial question for arguably our best and most consistent performing forward this year. Not even arguably, I'd even confidently say our best and most consistent performing forward this year. Normally, I would rebuke you, Mitko, and saying, what are you talking about? But this absolutely is a question. Selling well and at the right time has not been something Arsenal have gauged. Where do you sit in that camp, Rohan? Because I don't think it's as simple as short-term, medium-term, long-term thinking. Because this is a guy that, since his contract extension, has been absolutely unbelievable. And he always gets met with, is this the summer? Is this the window that Trossard goes? Despite him being outrageously consistent with his output, absolutely constantly proving his worth and value, and just being one of the few forwards to consistently change drawn or losing game states. With all that eulogy, I'm going to set you up. Where do you stand on the proper selling, the timing of selling, and specifically Leandro Trossard?
I mean, I probably get this wrong because I said we should sell him in the summer. That's gone by, and he's completely made me look like a fool. I think, though, this summer, I'll go again, I think is the right time to sell Leandro Trossard.
So you hate him? That's multiple years in a row.
I absolutely hate him. And do you know what? Hopefully, if he proves me wrong again, brilliant, because then that means he's going to have another good season in terms of his performances. Because I think that's the key, isn't it, George? Like this season, Trossard has always been a productive player for Arsenal. And he will, irrespective of what's happened this season, he's been massive value for money. That has been enhanced to a different level in terms of value for money because of his performances this season, the consistency he's provided, and how when we're talking about our left-hand side, it's the best it's functioned since 22-23, hands down. And he's a key part of the reason of why that has occurred. I will say, though, I mean, things can change, right? But the club, with the way that they managed the Trossard situation, suggested that this isn't a long-term thing because they gave him the salary rise as opposed to additional years. That's why Arsenal wanted to get it done before the season started. If they hadn't worried about, pushing for that salary increase before the season started, then they would have just waited and they would have given him a deal with further years. But the fact that they didn't want to do that suggests to me that this is very much one in which it's this year, in my opinion, and then, go out on a high. Because we feel the worth that you had to the team. We felt, obviously, he didn't manage to get a club elsewhere. From the reports from The Athletic, it suggested that Arsenal did look at moving Trossard on, and he wanted a new journey as well. That didn't materialise.
Switched agents.
Yeah, switched agents, and here we are with him with a rise that's fair because he needs to be valued in line with his teammates. That's just part and parcel of any working job that you have. You want to be paid fairly with the contribution that you give to the team. And yeah, but I do think this summer, we will sell him.
Yes, I think when you have a look at the forward line, we have discussions to be had because there's a lot of potential change. And honestly, some of this domino for me really does impact quite a bit about what we do with Kai Havertz. That's such a major contract extension that is up in the air and will have interest. I mean, he's got 2 years left this summer, Kai Havertz. And, you have a look at us just buying a striker who I think is underperforming at this point in time that we did buy for quite significant money. You look at Marino's performance as far as the center forward positions, and, he's absolutely proved utility there. And so you're looking at a striking department that, while I don't think is got the killer I would love, has a ton of prime age talent there that has absolutely tons of contingency, but maybe not the quality. And then you look at the left-hand side, in which Trossard has been our only forward capable of solving that conundrum that we really haven't been able to solve for nigh on 2.5, 3 years, right? And it's a very difficult call. This is a very roundabout way of making sure I give all the praise, but I don't know if long-term and if the summer is something I would continue with. I mean, this is... I have said Arsenal will not get better at selling unless it hurts. And This one will hurt. It's, I think, a player that has done nothing wrong, but doesn't have his best years in front of him.
Yeah.
In fact, doesn't have many years left in front of him, in my opinion. And it's a position that I think we've looked at needing to be rejuvenated and given the proper investment for nigh on 2 to 3 years. I mean, a proper left wing and solving that problem has been probably on the lips of most Arsenal fans for quite a while. And I hope that the focus of that this summer is that, especially given that I may not agree with the solutions that we did on the striking department, but we've got the prime age contingency there. You've got 3 players that are in their prime age, and I don't love all 3 players, but you can't do anything without moving stuff on. And that's not even talking about Jesus, who I think will also go. And there's a kind of redundancy there as far as their profiles go. So it's one of the things where this will hurt. I think his value is at a perfect time to be sold. And I think that, in addition, if we want to make the advancement in a forward area and significant advancement, it would come from left wing. Yeah. And you would hope that you buy that to have that output there. Yeah. But there is a lot of questions, and that is a front line in general that I think has tons of options, but maybe not the quality that we all want.
There's uncertainty there, isn't there, George? I mean, you're looking at something like a Martinelli as well.
Yep. We're
seeing the plans for Eze as well in terms of how we integrate him consistently in the team. There's a lot of things happening there. So... yeah, it's really interesting. I think, again, the most uncertainty remains in the front line, which is something that has remained prevalent under Mikel, really.
Look, I think, mate, just to tie it off, there's quite a few players that I think we come on the inside, and I've said this a lot. I really want us to have somebody that's really comfortable in lane 5, fundamentally. I think that there's a lot of talents out there, but I just look at this collection of forwards, and I don't know if I've got somebody that loves to be a line hugger. I don't know if I've got, if we actually go through the front line, Jesus is somebody that's ball to feet in central areas, right? Saka is somebody who can operate on the out. He can do anything. He's a unicorn. But, I mean, Saka loves to be inside, and you want to give him the inside channel more often than not. You look at Trossard. That's a player who likes to play on the inside. You look at Eze. That's a player who likes to come in on the inside. You look at Gyökeres and Kai Havertz, who are both channel runners, but Kai Havertz is somebody that likes to drop in as well as being a box presence. That's another inside man. You look at Gyökeres, he can definitely go outside and run the channels, but that's another player who is obviously, as a number 9, going to operate between the 18-yard box. And I look at it, and Madueke is probably the only touchline comfortable player that loves that
out and out chalk in his
side of the
boots,
pitch.
really, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and so that despite us having a Martinelli who we've used in that role, I don't think loves it. I think Martinelli likes to come on the inside. He may start in those areas, but he wants to come inside and get to the box. So it's definitely a profile that likes to play and do his best work on the outside is something that I think we're still looking for. So that's probably the one profile that I would look at. And I think that we can sacrifice our older heads to make that happen is basically a long roundabout way of saying that. But we will leave it there. Rohan, thank you so much as always, my man. It's always brilliant talking to you. How are you feeling lastly going into Liverpool? Just give me a last 30-second bit and tell me it's going to be okay. And tell me that we're going to smash them and that I'm right. Actually, give me a score prediction. Let's put you on the spot.
Smash them. We are the Arsenal. Arnie Slot. Screw that guy. Screw Liverpool. We're coming for them. That's all that matters. And I'm looking to go to the game as well. So, and I've not lost a game this season when I've been there. It's quite bad. Last season, every single time I went, we weren't winning. I was thinking, okay, I'm actually cursing this club right now. So, yeah, fortunes have changed this season, but let's see.
That's such a brilliant game to go to, man. You're going to have so much fun. Oh, my God. I would love to do that. Guys, petition to get George across the pond is on the way. We're taking applications. So, yes, I think it'll be brilliant, and I'm looking forward to the game. Obviously, a lot of jokes in there about Arnie Slot, but I think this is time to set a marker, and I will challenge you, please, Arsenal, satisfy my irrational hate of Arnie Slot. Please go and do the business. Give me a classic 3-1 George prediction. I love those things. I love the 3-1s with me. Give me a good, proper 3-1 spanking, please. But guys, thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with us. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.